Welcome to Slayerfest 98. I'm your host, Ian Carlos Crawford, and today I have an all-star lineup because we're going to be talking about one of my other favorite TV shows that is, I would say, fairly underrated. It ended last year. It's The Magicians. And joining me is Big Brother Season 20 contestant,
Angela Rockstar.
Hi, Angela.
Hi.
And I have TV writer,
Neil McNeil.
And writer and journalist,
Philip Ellis. Hello.
And Doctor of English and my BFF,
Kimberly Ann Southwick.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
So I figure the way we'll start this is, how did each of you get into the show? Neil, I'll have you go first.
I literally looked up this tweet this morning because I was like, I'm fairly certain I was hungover on New Year's Day, staying at my parents' house, and realized that season 1 of The Magicians was finally on Netflix. And I didn't have cable at my house, so I was like, okay, let me finally get into this weird, magical, dummy show. And I watched the whole season in a day and was like, great, I'm obsessed. I'm fully in. And then from that point on, I was watching weekly when it was on.
Oh, I love that. Angela, how'd you get into it?
I think that I just passed it on Sci-Fi when it was airing. And I think it might have been like they were playing the episode again because I fell asleep, but I was into it. So I was like, let me watch this again. And then I was just I said, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing since Buffy. And and to me, that's like, it was from the gods. So I had to tune in. I love it. I love it.
Philip, how'd you get into it?
So I was aware of the books, but I had never read them. And then I was sort of vaguely aware of the TV series. And I think, actually, Ian, it was you that got me into it. I think either we'd had a conversation about it or I'd seen you tweeting about it, because obviously I know it's one of your favorite shows. And basically, it was a Saturday night, and I was like, oh, I can't face scrolling through like the endless, Netflix home screen to find something. So I'm just going to go and watch this show that's kind of been on my radar for a little while. I'm a big fan of like a Sci-Fi Network drama series where it's like, here are a load of really charming people. They're filming on a soundstage in Vancouver with the same sort of stable of Canadian actors. Like, that gives me warm, good feelings. Like, I'm a big Killjoys fan. So I binged season 1, much like Neil, in like one night. I think I sort of stayed up until like 2 a.m. to finish it. And then I think within the course of a month, I'd watched the first 4 seasons, and then I watched the final season. By that point, that was airing weekly, sort of going into this. This was all last year. So like, basically, The Magicians became my quarantine show, and I was watching that week on week. At the very first start of lockdown last year. So I watched the entire series within like 2 months.
I love that, and I actually was hoping, I was like, ooh, I think Philip might have watched it because of me. Kim, how did you get into it?
I mean, I didn't technically watch the show because of you, but I did read the first book because of you, which probably in turn led to me watching it on Netflix when I, did the Netflix scroll and was like, oh, this looks good. I think I read that book. Probably that kind of thing happened and just was hooked from the first season.
So, yeah, Kim and I had read the first book together, and the show I had watched, I think it's like I had watched like season 1, and season 1 ends on a cliffhanger, and I was like, okay, I have to finish this. I got like halfway through season 2, and I kind of felt like, and then Kim actually was the one that got me back into it and was like, no, like, if you keep going, you will love this. Which is funny because, Kim, you've now done that with 2 shows, and you've been 100% correct. It was this and Schitt's Creek that both I like kind of fell out during season 2, and you were like, no, keep going, it will be your favorite. And both of them ended up being my favorite. So
yay.
Good job, Kim. Yeah, I think the show, I don't know if you'll all agree, I think season 1 is good, especially I appreciated it more like when I watched it a second time, having like the full scope of the show, because like all the pieces are there. And I do think, like you said, Angela, I think there's like definitely a line between Buffy and this. Like, there's a reason this has become like probably my second favorite show. And I mean, a lot of the showrunner, Sarah Gamble, is a huge Buffy fan. Summer Bishel is a huge Buffy fan. She's been on to talk Buffy on this podcast. It just feels like a progression of like, right? It just feels like a story that could have been, the characters, what they could have been if they were told, and if they were like telling that story now. And I think that that's why there's a lot of Magicians fans who are Buffy fans. But season 1, I almost feel like you can feel that like they had to kind of conform to the network. And then post season 1, they kind of were like, ooh, we're going to make this really queer. We're going to like make it really violent. We're just going to like do whatever the fuck we want, have musical episodes. And so I almost feel like season 1 is a little bit more controlled season wise. And like Quentin's definitely the main character. They're definitely like pushing Quentin and Alice. And while they do stay off and on, whatever couple, they're not so focused on them. And they were like laser focused on them in season 1, I felt like. Did you guys feel that way?
Yeah.
I think, I mean, and maybe Neil can speak to this a little bit more than I can, but I think just like in the first season of anything, there are like structures you have to stick to in terms of just, this is how you begin, you know, a long running story. This is how you introduce a large cast of characters. And so it is a lot more sort of, I guess, of a traditionally made and like told story at the start, and obviously like building and laying out this sort of, you know, fantastical world. But yeah, and then it kind of, I kind of do love that just it goes to bigger, weirder, wilder, crazier, queerer places the longer it goes on.
Yeah, season 1 is definitely more grounded because you kind of get a sense that they're trying to appeal to as many viewers as humanly possible. I mean, the fillery of it all is there, but it's not really the main focus of season 1. It's, oh, these are kids at a magical boarding school, and oh my gosh, they discover this magical world is real. Whereas in the later seasons, we're literally like venturing off to like find magical keys in different worlds and go to talking dragons. And it's like, we couldn't have gotten away with that in season 1, but we needed season 1 to have laid all the groundwork for this expansive world in order for us to get to that point. So while I do think that season 1 is like not what the show is, I appreciate it for what it did in the long haul.
Yeah.
It also, to me, felt like it was trying to live up to the marketing that I'm sure that I think the book was marketed this way. So I guess when it came out on actual Sci-Fi Network, it was probably marketed this way too. This whole like, what if your actual favorite fantasy series was real and actually really fucked up, you know? So like so much of, especially when I went back over it, it felt like they were like making sure to like point the finger at that. It's like, oh, like, you know, you think this is fun and real? Like, here's how messed up it is. And once that's established, like, the show doesn't need that trope to keep people hooked anymore. But that was definitely a big marketing scheme for the books. And I think that they tried to keep that as something for season 1 as well.
Oh yeah, there was a big Harry Potter for adults tagline all over the books and the show, I remember. Yeah,
I remember telling everybody when it came out, it was like if Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Harry Potter had a baby, but the baby did drugs and had orgies. Like that was what this show was, and that's how I was pitching it to my friends.
That's about right.
You were pitching the show as baby orgies?
No.
I mean, that sounds like something the show would do.
Yeah, but if they had like a child, if they meshed those things together.
Yeah. Well, you know, Kim actually texted. Kim and I have been doing like a Skippy rewatch this season, and she was like, man, the delivery when Margot's like, I'll fuck these horses if they can get us there faster. And Elliot's like, these are talking horses. And she's like, it still stands. But okay, so I guess we should talk about the characters. While Elliot is very much your like straight dude character, I love that they eventually kind of like queer him up. Because he's very much presented as like sad straight boy.
Wait, do you mean Quentin?
You mean Quentin?
Quentin, yes.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I get them mixed up too by name. I don't know why I get their names mixed up too, but now I feel better about it. Anyway.
So we're both nanas. So Quentin, yes, is very much presented as like just like sad straight guy. And because I feel like Neil and Philip, you can probably back me up here. There are a lot of like those type of like straight guys that definitely identify as straight that like still are like, yeah, I'll hook up. Like, and Quentin does kind of read that way. And I feel like in a lot of shows, we don't often get that where it's like, okay, yeah, they still identify as straight, but like, yeah, they'll like hook up with like their gay friend who they like have a close bond with.
I mean, the Quentin Margot Elliott threesome episode like changed me as a person. So I think I fully think that Quentin has always been queer. I would never call him a straight character. He's like a Kinsey 3, right? 2, 3?
Yeah, I think he's like, my take on that character is, if he ever got his head out of his arse long enough to think about something other than just how sad he is, he would have done some like work and realized that he is bi and like identify as such.
Yeah, I mean, but you know what I mean? Like, I feel like we all know those guys. Like, that's what I mean. That like still like identify as straight, but like will.
But they're not.
And I don't think in shows we often get that, right? I feel like we're more likely to get like women characters who maybe can like do that than we do men characters.
Oh, it's super rare for like male bisexuality to, and especially in a main character.
Right.
Yeah. No, yeah, you're right there.
But so I mean, I know it's like, I don't know. I had such a crush on Quentin. He was like very much my, like, give him tattoos on one arm and like, there you go. He's 100% my type. But like from his like intro in episode 1 where they like play MGMT, which is one of my favorite bands, I was just like, ooh, I definitely have a crush on this guy. And he has good hair. He's cute. He's got nice lips. But I also identify with him as like the depressed nerd. Like, I think he explicitly calls himself a depressed super nerd, like after meeting Elliot. And I was like, ooh, I relate to this character. What did you all think of Quentin? Kind of like, I mean, his arc ends with him dying. But Angela, before we recorded, what did you say about that?
I said that's true to the books.
And I had no idea. Does he die in the third one?
Yes, because it wraps it up basically with Julia becoming the goddess, and it goes into that in the books about her choosing, and Quentin stays in this other world, which is basically like his, and it is kind of like, even in the series they touched on, like, is it a suicide? Is it not? He's always been depressed. Is he really go? And that was talked about in the book as well. So that actually happened. So the series went beyond the books. The show did, which was why there was like a chatter about whether it would go on or not, because it had surpassed the books. But I'm thinking, Game of Thrones surpassed its books. Keep it going. Keep it going.
Yeah. And I do think the books and show are like different. They were already different, right? It's not like they definitely used plots, but they were different enough anyway, right?
Yeah, well, they deviate and add for sure, but when you read if you were to read all 3 books now, you would understand that they actually do stay pretty true to it, while adding a lot.
Okay.
Speaking of this, I got this theory when Ian and I were brainstorming for this episode. I was like, oh my God, what if the books and the TV show are on 2 different timelines? Because the TV show is timeline 40 and the books maybe are a different timeline. And I looked up on the internet, and of course other people had thought of this theory before and debunked it, and it's not the case. Just so y'all know.
Because in the show there is a couple of times, isn't it like twice that Margot's referred to as Janet?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's like the character in the book. I do like that shit, but I guess it's just like a nod. But yeah, Neil, you've written for TV. How do you feel about Quentin's arc?
Quentin's arc is actually, I think, one of the most fleshed out from start to finish, because when we first meet him in the pilot, he, like you said, is a depressed super nerd who kind of sees himself as, I should be a hero. I should be this person. I should be this main character in this story. And the only way for me to be able to fulfill my destiny is to become this hero and to save the world and to sacrifice everything. And at the end of his story, he is ultimately able to save the world by sacrificing himself. Whether or not that's intentionally a suicide on his part is up for debate. But he did set out and do something and accomplish something that he thought is his destiny. And he was able to not only fulfill his destiny, but save the lives of all of his friends and the entire world. So for me, Quentin's story is actually quite beautiful and tragic. And like we said, it's like, yeah, he died at the end of season 4. And I think we could have just kept going at that point. We could have gone for so many more seasons because he sacrificed himself so that we could have this entire world. And unfortunately, Sci-Fi was like, actually, he's dead. Story's wrapped up. We're good. And it's like, no, give us more. Give us more. Let's honor Quentin's memory even more. He did so much for us.
Sacrificed.
Philip, what did you think of his arc?
I found him kind of one of the least interesting characters, I think, just because in this show there are so many huge, funny, vibrant personalities. And I think, obviously, having him as, like, the audience surrogate, like, that works. You know, he's this protagonist who sees himself as the protagonist, and he's sort of, you know, he is our way into break bills and into filler and everything. But it's like, I was just always more interested in what, like, Elliot or Margot or even Marina were doing.
Yes, Marina.
I mean, I'm sure we'll get to Marina, but what I will say is I loved his friendship with Julia through all of the highs and lows that they had. I love seeing platonic friendships between men and women on screen because, again, we don't get that much.
You know what, Tim? We've talked about that a lot. Like, I felt like you're right. I mean, we don't, if it's two gay characters or like, two lesbians or two straight, like normally there's always a romance. If it's like, it can happen, it does happen. And I genuinely loved their friendship. I loved that there was no like, oh, but he's pining for her forever. And like, I feel like other shows would have had it be that one of them was pining for the other this whole time.
Did it start like that? I can't remember.
He did have a crush at the start, right?
Like right at the very start, until he meets Alice, basically, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got that like funny relationship. I mean, in the very beginning, he's reading the Fillory book and Julia jumps in his bed and Julia's boyfriend is making a joke and they're all very like, I loved that from the start. I loved that. I was like, oh, they're setting this up for fun people, even though this guy is like seemingly unfun. With fun people. So
yeah, no, that's the type of shit I love because that also feels like true to friendships, right? Like it feels like, this is how to, I mean, they had been friends since like childhood, right? Wasn't that their whole like thing?
Mm-hmm.
And Kim, we've been friends since childhood and like that's like shit we would do, right? Like
I remember when I don't know when it was that we said this in what season, but I remember you and I saying something like, Margot and Elliot are the characters that we wish we were, but in our terms of our friendship, but Julia and Quentin are the characters we actually are. Had to be early on because I feel like the Elliot-Margot friendship develops in a way that even though we're unfortunately not that cool, we can still relate to them a lot. And the relationship that the first two seasons between Julia and Quentin that develops definitely is something that as people that have been friends for such a long time, we can relate to.
Yeah. I was just thinking that because in my last night for my rewatch, season 3 is my favorite season. So I was doing more season 3 episodes last night. And it was when he leaves on the boat and Margot says to him, like, what's the difference between a hero and a moron? And she's like she's being shitty, but she's being serious. Like she's upset and doesn't want to possibly lose her best friend. And he's like, oh, they get to the point that it's like, oh, a decision. And then they like kiss goodbye. And it's like a very loving kiss, but it's the way like like it felt like love between two best friends. And that I was like, oh, like, I love that. Like I love loving shit like that when it's not, there's no romantic undertone or anything. It's just like, yes, these are two characters showing affection because they love each other in a non-romantic way.
And Margot and Elliot are the loves of each other's lives. And I again, that's something I love seeing is like friendship being the defining love in a character's story. That Elliot has like one love interest in season 1, and then sort of, he kind of gets paired up with like one of the only other spare characters at the end. Margot has like a few dalliances, but really, like they are each other's constant. They are each other's anchors, and even though they're kind of incredibly sort of chaotic people, like there's always that connection there.
I'm gonna cry. But yeah, so, and Julia also had some pretty good character development, but I will say, even with doing research for this episode, I still am like a little blurry on, because is it by the end of season 2 or 3 where she's like officially a god?
3.
3, yeah.
3?
But, so, I remember texting you at some point about the show and being like, man, can Julia get a break? like in those early seasons, like it was too much.
Mhm.
She's depressed as hell in the most of the first season, right? Because she didn't get into break bills but found a way to remember it. And then
Right.
she's raped.
Right.
Mhm.
Then she's not only raped, but now is carrying this godchild, right?
Right.
Like, there's like 4 other terrible things that happen to her after that.
Well, and then she even goes to get the abortion, but like,
And
I
they
always
take her
forget.
shade when she gets the abortion. She doesn't have a shade anymore.
Yep.
Right, and the doctors kill themselves because of God. See, this is where I get mixed up. It's not the beast that raped her; it's the other one, right?
Reynard.
Reynard.
Right, because Reynard won't let her get rid of the child, so he like makes the doctors kill themselves, and it's just like Jesus Christ.
Mhm.
So with that in mind, Kim, did you like where she ended up?
Well, yeah, exactly, right? So she has the first 2 seasons are like, oh my God, like this poor character. And then
Yeah.
season 3, she's the only one with magic. It's like the tables have been turned. And like she's really able to develop, I think, as a character that isn't defined by just these successive unending tragedies.
Yeah.
So I like that she's the one that gets that. Like she's the only one that really could have.
Yeah. Angela, how'd you feel about Julia as a character?
There was one moment where I was just I despised her when she put Quentin back in the mental hospital in his mind, and then I loved her ever after. Like I understood the cool thing that I, as a practicing witch, pagan, like that's my religion. Hedge witches are a real thing. That means that you are not in one particular focused area, but that you kind of pick and choose from different. You could take some shamanism, you could take some Celtic, that is actually a term, and I love that they blend throughout the show actual like magic, which is what I also loved about Buffy through Willow, but
Yeah.
Julia, she really just becomes so powerful and exactly what they needed her to be in that timeline. And as you find out that like the whole reason she couldn't even go is because she needed to be the change. And it's always like it actually becomes a story about Julia where you thought it was about Quentin. I think Julia the main character, like
Yeah.
I because it's really her evolution, her trials and tribulations that ultimately make her this powerful force, a goddess, literally.
Yeah, no, I did like Julia. Yeah, you think you're right. Because a lot of the plots kind of like they need Julia. It's like a lot of times when like they're like doing the thing with whatever, whether it's moving the moon or like getting the keys, like Julia tends to be the point person, right? Like she's the only one that has magic in season. Like she tends to be the one that like gets the thing done. And is it the end of season 4 where it's taken away, right? Her like godness.
I think that is it season 3? That's the one with like the quest for all the keys.
Yep.
And then she uses her goddess powers to recreate the keys, and then basically like that uses up all of her power, and so she's sort of human again throughout season 4 until Quentin's death, and her grief kind of allows her to access magic again.
Yep.
All right.
It's a whole. I struggle really to get the sort of the timeline of like what happened in which season like straight in my head.
I think you got it.
Yeah, I think you did. You said it with a confident voice, so sure. So then there's Alice, who hands up. She was probably my least favorite character. Kim, what'd you feel about Alice?
So I can't decide. Alice and Julia are both like the Hermione character if we're going to go with the Harry Potter for adults. And I guess like Alice is just purposely unlikable for way too long. And in the beginning, she's just keeping to herself. She just wants to get her brother back or something. And then she winds up killing herself, right? In a big old same way her brother did, becomes a Niffin. Yeah. And when she comes back, she's also missing her shade, as Julia was. So then she's just like total biatch.
Yeah.
And then she's angry when she gets her shade back. So she's just like, she just doesn't have a chance to be likable. She's not made likable. She like we feel bad for her sometimes, and I'm intrigued by certain moments of the show and the way that they use her as a character, but like she's just not as likable as some of the other characters.
Well, when you meet her family, you kind of get a sense of why she's become this, like, unlikable monster who kind of takes her magic for granted. For me, she and Julia are just kind of two sides of the same coin, whereas Julia was someone who had her destiny taken away from her by the constantly resetting timeline. Alice was never taken out of break bills in any of these worlds, whereas Julia got everything taken away from her. So it's like, I sometimes wonder if Julia had been given the same opportunities that Alice had, would they have essentially have become the same character, or would they have gone on diverging paths?
That's a good point.
Alice, to me, I think is kind of like, and to bring it back to Buffy, she's kind of like Willow, but like Willow when she's being kind of her worst self in that sort of single-minded pursuit of knowledge and power at the expense of all else. I mean, she says like so early on that she doesn't even know what her potential is. Like she sees in herself the possibility for greatness, and she never really stops to think like, is that a good thing necessarily? And then obviously her big sort of arc is, she dies, she's a Niffin, she sort of goes through all of these metamorphoses, and then by the end of the fifth season, she has become a master magician. She has kind of fulfilled that destiny that she laid out for herself, but she's also been humbled through all of these experiences as well. And I think that was kind of maybe her, she started out incredibly, you're right, Kimberly, she started out incredibly unlikable and with this really like nerdy intensity and like that sort of, I feel like she even hammed up the sort of nasal voice when we first meet her. So she's just like this tightly wound, like bookish, like just sort of like, oof. But also it's like, oh, you're like a supermodel with huge cans, but we're going to pretend you're an ugly nerd. Okay, fine.
But you are right too. Like by the end of the show, I don't even notice how much I didn't like her in the beginning anymore. She has kind of like come into her own as a master magician.
Yeah, because I say she's my least favorite, but like I don't like, it's not like when she was on screen, I was like mad. Like I still liked her. And Neil, you bring up a good point. I actually really enjoyed the moments with her family. Like I enjoyed her mom as this like very cold chain smoking mother who's like still kind of like, even though she's like not a great mom, she's still like 100% knows Alice. Like, right? She's always right when she reads her.
Also, I love that they had like sex parties. Like that was a hilarious little detail.
It really tracks as well that she's got these kind of freewheeling, like, like the wealthy bohemian, like, free love parents. And so that means like, that's why she's such an uptight, preppy one. Because like she's rebelled by being as straight-laced as possible.
Yep. That's like the 60s parents that now they raised conservative people. Like that's exactly what I thought. She was very, very, very uptight, and it is in kind of a rebellion to these wild Saturnalia loving parents.
Yeah.
They were awesome though. I thought they were hilarious.
Oh yeah, her mum was awful in the most delicious way.
Yeah, that actor was great. So then I want to talk about Penny. I will say Penny was up top my least favorite character just because of how like awful he was to Quentin.
On a rewatch, that's hilarious though, but only on a rewatch.
But then I did end up like loving him. I never love, I mean like X-Men does this all the time, but I never love a like, that character died, but now we're going to replace them with a different version of that same character. Like I don't like, and I know that the thing the magicians always did was they like knew they were doing a trope, but did it differently. But that was the only one that didn't quite land for me.
Yeah.
I think if they'd made Penny 23 just like different, like he wasn't different enough.
Yes, he wasn't. Yeah, he didn't feel different to me.
What? He was in love with Julia. Isn't that different enough for you?
I mean, he was still like they kept that fine as hell actor around, so I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, he is very attractive.
In the books, Penny is a punk with a mohawk, and he wears those like jackets with the studs on them and stuff. And I really like how they created Penny for TV as this kind of like boho guy, like and I really enjoyed Penny. His trope of dying and coming back is also true to the books.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so that was in the books that he did and it was supposed to be the one that kind of hated Quentin died and the other one was more okay with him, I guess. Which kind of happens a bit.
Yeah. Kim, how did you feel about Penny?
I don't really remember disliking Penny 23 or thinking that he wasn't a good enough replacement or thinking that he was too much of the same character. I feel like I just bought into it all. So good job, TV writers.
Yeah.
I really liked on a rewatch, there was a moment where they've got like the Unity key and Penny's kind of gone for a while and Katie picks it up and Penny's like there and she's like, oh my God, Penny. But then it's Penny 23.
Yeah.
So I really liked the things that in those moments, and I think that's the key season. So that's season 3. Those moments in season 3 with Katie and his relationship with the new Penny, I think worked really well for me.
When Penny, like I fell for Penny because when he was sitting in class and he could hear Katie's thoughts and he was like, oh yes.
Yeah.
Like, I loved that.
One of the things I loved about original Penny, especially I think it was obviously after he either after he went to the library or after he died or both, but he is kind of the mechanism for 2 of my favorite episodes, which is 6 short stories about magic and the sidekicks, where the show breaks its format and does these sort of like anthologized episodes where you see the action unfolding from, basically the perspective of everyone except Quentin. And I loved all of the little storytelling tricks and things that they managed to pull off with him as like a narrator, Rod Sterling figure.
Yeah, and so that brings us to one of my other least favorite characters, Katie.
Oh, I love Katie.
All right, great. Neil, talk about why you love her.
I just love the stereotypical wrong side of the tracks, doesn't belong here, doesn't fit in, kind of like rough around the edges, but still wants to like make their mark in whatever environment they're in. And she wants to prove herself. She is someone who comes from a not so great background who at first you kind of figure out like maybe her intentions aren't always good, maybe she's not a team player, and then she slowly starts to soften and like becomes friends with everyone. Like, I don't know, I love that sort of redemption story, and I love seeing someone who wouldn't necessarily be given all these sorts of opportunities like an Alice character, still kind of fight for good and still kind of fight to make sure that her friends and the world at large are protected.
Yeah, especially like in the long run, how she does really join up with the Hedges and really works like for good for everyone. I think that tracks in terms of, being all for herself at the beginning. She's literally stealing from break bills and giving to Marina. I mean, she has to, but that's beside the point. She's still doing it. I mean, she's got a lot of tragedy too. I feel like her character kind of gets lost though, maybe in like season 2 and 3, because we have the emergence of Margot and Elliot as like more sort of main characters, and Katie's storyline seems murky, but I think it really works in the long run in the end.
Oh, right. Is that season 1 where her fucking mother gets like melted?
Yeah.
And is like almost never mentioned again.
Yeah,
like
it's like not
people who like go through bereavements and lose like siblings or parents, and then it's just sort of gets lost in the sauce because there's so much other crazy shit happening.
Like, wow, remember 5 years ago when my mom was melted by magic? No, I don't. Angela, what do you think of Katie?
I really like Katie. Katie and Penny one. I could have had them together forever. They reminded me of like my burner friends. That's like a Burning Man reference, like my festival friends, that the stylistically wise. I like that she overcame a drug addiction twice.
Yeah.
I think that's like, I always love to see stuff like that in TV because you never know who's watching or what they need to see. and nothing's ever unsurmountable. And she, and sometimes you fall off whatever it is that you're falling off of, and you got to get back on. I think it's on, right? I don't know.
I always forget. I always have that Seinfeld thing in my head where they're like, is it on the wagon or off? I always forget which
I don't
one.
know. Well, whichever way is the way where it's healthy for them.
Right.
She was able to do that multiple times on the show, and I thought that was good. And she just loved her mama. And without her, I don't know that we would have met Marina, but Marina's a badass. So I linked them together in my mind as well.
So that brings us to Elliot. Elliot, I loved him. I loved him.
Are we just skipping Josh, Ian?
Do you want to talk about Josh? We can talk about Josh.
He does become part of the crew in season 3.
He does.
A very important episode.
All right.
He'd be pissed if we skipped him.
All right, we'll talk about Josh first then. So we'll talk about Josh. I will say the way I remember reading, I think it might have been an Entertainment Weekly article that was like an interview about All About Josh, that musical episode. And they said that they kind of forgot about the character. Like when they were writing the scripts, they were just like, oh, we can't really fit him. So then they couldn't fit him in whatever the next episode was after his last one. And then they just kind of forgot to write him in. And we're like, great, we can have that be the like theme of the episode where he comes back, is that they forgot about him. And I will say, watching the show, there are so many side characters that die and are never talked about again that I forgot who he was until that episode. Like I kind of had forgotten about him, even though he is kind of important, especially moving forward.
Yeah.
I had definitely forgotten about him. Kim, since you brought him up, talk about Josh.
Yeah, I guess a lot of the episodes I watched in my Skippy rewatch had him in it. So like the Bacchus episode is one of them where he's important. And then I remember him because, he's one of the naturalists and one of the few people that does that. So I remember him just like being a chef in Fillory at some point or maybe not in Fillory, who knows, in an earlier episode. But I had forgotten that Bowie episode was like the whole point was like getting Josh like in as part of the crew. And I just loved that. It's like basically the middle of the whole show now that we know where it ends. And they're like, okay, like this guy's going to be important going forward. Like, let's just give him this entire, like maybe one of the better / best episodes of the show surrounded about like, getting him back on board. And then I was a little confused about the him and Margot hooking up thing, but then I think that the show pulled it off in the end for sure. Like their relationship, especially like when like they're like not hooking up anymore and they don't want to talk about it kind of thing, but he does want to talk about it and she doesn't, and it's like her regret and everything. I just thought all of that stuff was really well done as well in terms of relationships and feelings.
Yeah, that was like it was a kind of like a Xander and Cordelia, like Schmidt and Cece, that sort of dynamic where it's like, okay, like you need to have two great actors to really sell that like this queen would, lower herself. But like he is naturally like, incredibly like he wins everyone over, including the viewer. Like he's like a really lovable goof.
Yeah.
And I like Josh.
I think actually comparing it to Xander and Cordelia, it's like a leveled up version of that, where like Josh is the goof, but he's not like a toxic goof straight dude.
Oh yeah. He is like, I think maybe that's like the great thing about the show is it doesn't feel the need to have a Xander to speak for the straight white man.
Right. Yeah. Yes. And Josh is just Josh like is the very nice goofy guy. Like he just
kind of an odd because he's a werewolf too,
Yeah.
Getting everyone high,
Yep.
Cooking meth muffins for people.
Wild.
Neil, what do you think of Josh?
Oh, I thought he was so charming. I thought that actor was so great. Such a good addition to this cast of just like beautiful dummies where he's just like the typical everyman. And like, for me, that was the real audience point of insertion. Like Quentin at that point, I was just like, nobody sees themselves in you, Quentin. You're just too sad. You're too depressed all the time. I'm a Josh. I am just like a weird dude sitting in the corner, standing everyone and everything that's happening and like singing to myself when I want to. Like that's me. Josh is my character.
Neil, I have seen your thirst traps. You are not Josh.
I completely see myself as a Josh in every single situation.
You compare him with every character as well. I think he's kind of brilliant. You can drop him into anyone else's storyline and just like have him react and be that sort of audience surrogate. Like I remember in the because obviously, this is a show that loves tropes. They had the time loop episode, and there's a really lovely scene where Elliot is just like beaten down. He has been through multiple traumas by this point in the show, and he's just sort of like the world's about to end and hit for like the millionth time, and him and Josh are just sitting having like a quiet beer together, and it's really sweet.
Yes, I like that moment, and I also like it as like Josh is also comfortable being second to Elliot is another thing that I love, like. Mm-hmm. When Margot says goodbye to her men, she's saying goodbye to Josh and Elliot together in that finale. And I felt like that was very important. And Josh isn't threatened. There's no, like, he's not mad. He's like, yes, I know. Like, he's very much like knowing that Margot loves Elliot the most. And like, but Margot also loves him. Like, and like, that's the kind of shit. That's what I need in a man. Like someone who will be like, okay, yes, Ian loves Kim and like his other best friends, but like he loves me too. But like,
Aww.
But yeah, so I will say when he started dating Margot, I didn't like it, but by the end I loved it because it made
hard agree
sense.
Yeah.
Okay, I was wondering what everyone else thought.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, they sell us on that relationship completely to the point where then it's like, oh, I'm sorry, you slept with Sven? Fuck you.
He thought they were gone. I was like, okay. He thought that it was like this was it. There was never gonna get back to Margot and Elliot. So, but yeah, I'm not like like Xander and Cordelia. It's very like okay, they were in high school. Sure, I can buy it as like their kids. So why not? But like they're not a couple that I ever am like that into. But like this couple, they did sell me on it pretty quickly.
And I think it's because he helped to humanize Margot as well, because she, has got like a million walls. She is a walking, talking, like wisecracking fortress. And he just like wiggles his way in and finds that she has a heart under all of that. And who doesn't love that story?
That's a great point, Philip. I never thought of it that way.
Well, you're so smart, Philip. But now we'll talk about Elliot, because I love Elliot so much. At first, Elliot was kind of just like, I related to him in that, like, he was crushing on Quentin. I always think of Margot's introduction is, oh, that's Quentin. He's not that cute. Like, and that means Elliot was like talking about this new cute guy to his like best friend. And I just felt like that felt relatable to me. I know some people feel some kind of way about Elliot not quite getting a happy, like he didn't ever have like a stable relationship. But for me, he read as someone who wouldn't. Neil, what did you think?
Elliot is one of the more iconic characters of the past, I think, like decade of television, especially in his friendship with Margot. And I like what I never really put the pieces together that he didn't really ever have a healthy, long-standing relationship, unless you count that episode where he and Quentin literally died together on this farm, which I think is so beautiful and sad. But you're kind of right. He is one of those characters who was never really meant to have that sort of epic love story. And that's kind of what makes him so beautifully tragic in all this. And the fact that he became such an important figure in Fillory, even though it's never what he wanted. I don't know. He really became a fully fleshed out character and not just someone who, was horny for Quentin, which I really appreciated.
Philip?
So I have spent most of the day thinking about Elliot and just trying to be like, okay, if they ask me, like, can I put all my thoughts and feelings into like just a couple of sentences? So here goes. At the start of the show, Elliot is in drag. That is not him. I mean, his name is literally Elliot War. I think we can probably assume that he invented that surname for himself, when he was on the bus out from whatever flyover state he's actually from. He reveals that his dad was a farmer, and he basically cultivates this Oscar Wilde-esque like playboy persona. He is wearing the Brideshead revisited suits in season 1. Yeah. And then he just finds as real life keeps kind of like butting into this fantasy that none of it really fits anymore. And then he's sort of transposed into this kingdom, and he's forced to marry off, and he's given all this responsibility, and he has to actually think like, right, okay, when I'm not getting wasted and having sex, like, who am I? And it's kind of a question that pretty much everyone in the show has to kind of answer at some point. But I really like that sort of just visually throughout the show, you see him go on like his clothes tell a real story of like, he goes from being the party king of campus to the literal king of Fillory, and then it's like actually the scruffier and the dirtier he gets, like the realer he is. Like when he is on that quest with Quentin, living on that farm in that beautiful episode, or when he's sort of climbing a mountain in like a barber coat with Alice, and they're having that heart to heart about Quentin. And it's like actually just like removing all of that artifice, and he's still fabulous and he's still funny and he's still, he can still make a mean Manhattan or whatever. But like just some of those edges have been stripped away, and he's just like a realer, rounder person. And as somebody who has done a lot of the same shit over the last year of quarantine, I really, really saw myself in
that. Angela.
Oh, I love him. I love him throughout. I understand why he had to go through all of this, but I wish he wasn't I wish that his episode with Quentin and their life together, that was his whole, like, I wish the best for Quentin. I mean, for Elliot. I love him. I loved him. I love what you said about him being in drag at the start. And I understand what you're saying. Like when you put on something and you're just real extra. And I know those, like, I understand that. I really love him. I every time it seemed like things were going to go well for him. I mean, maybe Fenn should have been, into trying some stuff. I don't know. Like, I really wanted something to just be the right, like, the ultimate right thing for him, because I just loved him so much. Like, when I remember that episode, because I was like, ooh, maybe Fenn's a little freaky. Maybe this will be good. Like, maybe he'll be able to be the king and like happy and
shit. Angela, I imagine you being like, all right, Elliot, let's do this. I'm down for whatever. We can make it work.
Like History of the World Part 1, when she's picking who she wants for the... And she's like, no. Yes. No.
Yes. Kim, give me your Elliot speech.
So Elliot is like, he and Margot become the main characters of this show. And I feel like Margot very obviously becomes one of the main characters. And Elliot just like, you don't even realize how he's wormed his way into the spotlight and like into your heart. I mean, yeah, sure, like he's the king or whatever in season 2, but like that's when he becomes the king and everything. And he remains the king for a good part of the show, though not all of it. But like he's just always there. And I feel like you even love him. And again, I too like the point about him being in drag. You even love him then.
Yeah.
Like it's not even, he doesn't have to win you over. You love him from the start, and then you're just like so glad when things go his way, even though they don't actually, go his way in a very typical or tropey happy ending kind of way.
Yeah.
I mean,
I want to mention one Elliot moment. Sorry. But in my rewatch, there's the episode called, I think, like The Happy Place, where they're like in his head, I guess, and they're in his happy place. And it didn't occur to me until a rewatch that what we were living in those early parts of that show were his happy place, and that part of his happy place was him renaming Todd. Because Todd comes in, he's like, my name's Elliot. And Elliot's like, yeah, that's not going to work. What's your middle name? And like, I love that, like, in his brain, like, that's like one of his happy place moments.
It is like really silly and perfect that it's a happy place moment for him. I love Elliot. I love him so much. I was glad that he kind of got a happy ending. Like, it felt a little rushed at the end, but I was glad that he had someone.
Yes.
That like also understood him. Because the guy had like literally been living in his brain. Now we will talk about our favorite High King, Margot. I said this to Kim. I've said this in our group chat. Margot definitely rivals Buffy and Cordelia for me. Like sometimes I'm like, maybe I love her more. But like she rivals those characters, and I know all 4 of you know how much I love Buffy and Cordelia.
Yeah.
Like for me, Margot her arc is just absolutely perfect. There's a moment in season 3 when they've drugged her like child husband. And he's like asleep in the carriage. They go to look at the fairy eggs. They're in the carriage and like they say how they feel like they've lost who they are. And I will say I watched it stoned and I was like, oh, they're talking about the show because of their character development. Oh, that's what this is. And like that is what it is. But like it's kind of showing us like these characters have come so far. They're even recognizing that they're like, wow, we're like actually helping Fillory instead of just like being shitty and jokey about it. And while they are also being shitty and jokey, they're still like, you know, right before that scene, they find out there's these fairy eggs and Elliot gets back to the carriage and he looks at Margot and she comes running, holding all the fucking eggs. And she's like, let's go.
That will always make me laugh. Just the physical comedy of it. It's like, oh yeah.
Just she's like so small. She has these giant fucking fairy eggs. And like, I don't know that like, I think Philip, you had said this to me before that like Margot's what Cordelia could have been if she were like written by someone better. And I really think that's true. Like Cordelia's arc was like so almost there, but then she gets put in a coma. She's dead. And like Margot just feels like that is a character that I wish I wrote. Like that's a character I strive for writing in my stuff, even before I knew who Margot was. Like that's the kind of character I want to write, who's like severe, has a filthy fucking mouth, and like can like drag you for filth, but also will help when she needs to. Like she knows when she needs to help. Kind of like in season 1, how like she spends most of the season just being like the mean girl. Mm-hmm. But then at the very end, when Elliot has to marry Fen, who is played by a different actor in that one episode, she has this like really sweet moment that made me tear up. The first time I watched, like every time I watch that episode, it makes me tear up where she's like, can I say I just kind of hate that you're getting married because you're the only person I can stand? And like, I feel that. I feel that, man, as like the perpetually single gay friend. Like for me, that was the first time she had like a lot of depth and it just continued throughout the show. And I think Summer Bishel's portrayal of her is just so fucking perfect.
Perfect.
And like her delivery, the way her like cadence with the way she like speaks, it is perfect. Angela, I know you also stan Margot. So
oh my gosh, I love her. I loved her at all her levels. I loved her as bitchy mean girl. I loved her as high king, and I loved her as horrible baby traitor. I mean, I love all of the things. She could do no wrong in my eyes. I just loved her. And you're right. I mean, I can't even imagine anybody else playing that after the way that Summer played her. She just nailed it and embodied and made the characters so believable. I mean, they're all just so believable. These characters are people. Yeah. I think that's some of the real magic of the show is that like any one of these characters could be anybody that any of us knows. Like they're real. They're so relatable. But I love, yes, Margot, all day. Fashion, sex, drama, yes, everything about her.
And she even looked fucking good with the eye patch.
Eye patch, yes.
Oh my god, the bedazzled eye patches that she had. I was like, okay. If I ever like, you know, get gingivitis, I know what I'm going with stylistically.
Do we think that's when she started to channel Samuel L. Jackson? Was when she got the eye patches, or was it before?
I get that reference, Ian, because I've now watched all the Marvel.
Yes, all the Marvel.
Yeah, because there were certain lines where she would say, like, I always got surprised when they would slip in an F-bomb. I don't know why.
Me too.
Mm-hmm. So, like, she would have a motherfucker every now and again. And I understood that. To me,
I feel like maybe they saved the F-bombs for Margot because she is the only character I can remember swearing because she would deliver it with such panache when she'd be like, well, fuck.
Yeah,
right.
It's crazy though because if you had ever watched it live on Sci-Fi while it was airing on cable, they bleeped out all the F-bombs.
Oh, I mean, you're losing something from the text there, you know.
Yeah. I think that didn't they stop doing that like towards the end? I think, or did they still do it?
I think they had. I feel like I was shocked watching it on Sci-Fi and I would be like, oh my gosh, because I didn't remember there being cuss words on Sci-Fi.
Yeah, I remember in season 3, there were a couple of times where they dropped her audio whenever she would say fuck. And I was like, that's literally the best part of the show is when Margot says fuck and you're not letting me enjoy it.
That's so when I had a couple of like folks from that, like I had James Marsters and Tom Lank do like quarantine advice at the like peak of quarantine, and I had Summer Bishel do one where they like would say their quarantine advice / their character's quarantine advice. And I was like very happy that Summer used, because I was like, and if you want to do like, for you do your quarantine advice, and then when you do Margot's, you can just make it something like, you know, you say stay home and Margot says stay the fuck home. And she exactly did that. And it was my pride of like kind of writing Margot for like 1 second. And she like gave the fuck delivery the way she always did with Margot. And it was like, yep, that's perfect. Like,
Love her.
Kim?
Oh, Margot. I mean, she's just the best. Like everybody said, it's hard to add to it. Except I will say that I think we can get to Margot as she is, as we love her, with Margot alone to a certain extent. But I don't think that we can have Margot without Elliot or Elliot without Margot. And I think that that's an important thing for me to mention. Like they need each other to be the best possible characters that they wind up being, and that they really are from the start. And I just want to add that because I think it's important.
Kim, I think that's like a really fucking good point. Like, because their love for each other is always there. Like that's the like definitely always there, is that they love each other. And they kind of, you know, I think I've talked about this a couple times in season 5 when we're like sans Quentin and like Elliot's super fucking depressed. They have that moment that like is such a small moment, but I love it so much because it feels so true to two best friends who love each other. When he's just like being messy and kind of a dick to her. Mm-hmm. And she's like, just talk about your feelings. And she like uses the line like, if I were you, I'd be driving a semi down fucking Fury Road. And he kind of like brushes her off. And she's like, okay, you're pissing me off, so I'm going to leave you alone for a little bit. And like, but that's not like her being like, you're an asshole. It's just like, hey, you're pissing me off. I need some space. I'm going to walk away. And then they're fine the next time they see each other. But like that felt like such a true, like these are people who love each other moment, right?
They get all those little moments. They nail them. And it makes the bigger moments even better. So when she's elected High King and like, she didn't even run. Yeah. You know? And like in the beginning of that episode, Elliot's like, yeah, I think like someone with a penis needs to run. Like he literally says that. And she's like, yeah, sure, fine, whatever. And then she's elected and she goes over to him and she's like, oh my God, like, I'm so sorry. And you watch him and he like does the math in his head. Oh, I'm going to cry. And then he like kneels down in front of her and he's like, king or whatever. And I'm like, oh God, this is so good. You know, but they earn a moment like that. And like the acting is phenomenal there, but like because they have all these other great little moments.
Yeah, that is maybe one of my favorite moments between them because like he just pauses for like a second, then turns and like grabs her hand and is like, "All hail High King," and she like cries and I love it so much. Yeah, I don't know. I could do a whole episode on fucking Margot because I just feel like the like nuanced mean girl doesn't get a lot of love, especially in genre. Mm-hmm. Seeing that like trope thrive on this show was like such a nice thing.
it's so easy to kind of get it wrong or to write it incredibly like lazily and make that character very two-dimensional.
Yeah,
I think it was when the series finale was airing, the cast were all answering questions on social media, and Summer Bishel kind of alluded to the fact that Margot's writing in the first season actually was a little bit bare bones, and that so much of basically what helped her with the characters is she came up with a whole backstory and motivation for the character that was not there on the page, that then informed how the writers wrote her kind of moving forward. Like she kind of she conceived that character as much as, you know, Lev Grossman or the TV writers, in the way that, you know, Margot rather than Janet, you know, she made that happen, and it was like the alchemy of no other actress would have done the same job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. So I guess now that we're, you know, an hour in, we'll try to like breeze through the seasons. I feel like maybe the finale we'll spend a little bit more time on, but season 1, I gotta mention there's like the Taylor Swift Shake It Off moment, which I remember being a moment that I really loved when I first watched it. And during my rewatch, I was thinking about how like, and you know, this isn't shade to Taylor Swift, but I know she doesn't easily give away the rights for her music. So I looked up, I was like, there's gotta be an article somewhere about this. They paid $20,000 to use that. And it's like, what? Like not even a full minute?
Oh my
Um,
Oh, yeah.
god.
yeah.
Music, especially pop music, is so expensive. It's absurd. They rarely cut deals for that shit. Like, you're paying $25,000 for like a minute of a Taylor Swift song anytime you use it.
Guys, this has been really fun, but I gotta go write a pop song.
Right, Neil, you worked on a show that had songs in it, so you would definitely know about.
Like, regularly, it's actually really, I can't wait to talk about this when we get to the musical episodes, but just like this being the first like real like quote unquote musical moment of The Magicians, like it just made the show that much more, I mean, forgive me for this joke, but magical, where it was just kind of like, oh my god, this show can literally be anything right now. Like, we're having a Taylor Swift dance party in a mental institution that
Yeah.
he's trying to break out of. Like, this is, how was this show made specifically for me?
I thought it was funny when Penny called Quentin racist for having him
Yeah.
have that voice, the accent.
Yeah.
Like, you racist, like, but he's still helping him out. Like, I don't know. I thought that was funny.
Yeah, I do. I really like that episode.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just wild that it was like Taylor and Neil. I think you're right. It's like, it feels like it's made for, I mean, like all of us, it feels like it really is made for us. And I think it's because even though like and I mean, you've worked on a show, so you can correct me, but isn't it harder to make more modern, like to make it so topical, right? Like,
Mm-hmm. Like, you're always going to be afraid of like dating yourself and
Yeah.
dating the show. You want to be able to have people go back and watch this 10, 15 years down the line and be like, oh, this is a fun moment. And you don't want them to be like, oh, not that stupid Taylor Swift song that was big for like a day.
yeah, and I feel like this show, and I mean, we will definitely get there with the pop culture reference scene. Like the jokes were like topical, but also still like not like that. Like, you're not rolling your eyes at their pop culture references.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because like even in the last season, right, Kim? Kim just recently went through all the Marvel movies. Before she got to Endgame, there was like an Endgame joke
Reference, yeah.
in season 5.
Yeah.
And like, you know, they do such a good job of like keeping the references not too, like, you know, like, I mean, we all watch Buffy here. When we go back to Buffy, sometimes it's like, ooh, that reference does not hold up.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But for the most part, I think in this show, a lot of the references
Well,
hold up, right?
I think musically, the Taylor Swift moment, I mean, this would have been 2015 when they were filming the first season, so I guess that like they were like, we want a big Taylor Swift song that is of the moment, but every musical episode moving forward, it felt like they went a bit more timeless and classic with the songs
Mm-hmm.
that they chose.
yeah.
Yeah. So this season, we're like focused on Quentin's story. We learn that Christopher Plover, who Kim and I had trouble figuring, I was like, which one is Christopher Plover? Which one is the Beast? Martin Chatwin is the Beast.
They get confused too. In our defense, they are like, oh, the Beast must be him because he's a pedophile, which is what you're about to say. So it wasn't just us; they deceived us.
Okay, so yeah, we find out that like Quentin's beloved author of these books that he loves so much, we find out is a pedophile, and we go to like, I forget, is it the Chatwin's house that they go to? That's the spooky haunted place.
Creepy as fuck ghost episode, yeah.
It's Plover's house that he lived with his sister.
Yeah.
Okay. So they go to that house, and it is like pretty creepy.
Yeah, that episode's terrifying.
Yeah, and then so by the end of the season, is it like they get to Fillory, and that's where the Beast kind of demolishes them?
Mm-hmm.
So like, I remember like being pretty shook that it felt like, ooh, did they just kill half the cast in that finale? Because right before that, Margot has the line of like, blah, 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 are we in a show that kills its main characters halfway through the first season? And then is like, are we even the main characters? We might be comic relief. And like, that is such a good meta moment, but like, it doesn't feel too winky, even though it is pretty winky. And I remember being like, oh shit, because like he cuts Penny's hands off, and what? Then Julia just like comes in and teleports away, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like it ends on a cliffhanger. Season 2 kind of, it's like season 1.5 almost.
It's like Harry Potter 1 and 2, where we need season 1 and season 2 to like set the groundwork for the magic, if you will, that's going to happen for the rest of it. So yeah, season 1.2 feels about right. And especially because like you'd mentioned, the big bad isn't even killed at the end of season 1, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Well, right. And then it's not even the beginning. It's not like the first episode. Alice kills him like 2 or 3 episodes into season 2, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
she becomes a Niffin too. So like not only
Right.
do we lose the big bad, but we also like lose one of the major characters in a way.
Yeah. But also, they are crowned king and queens of Fillory, the gang. That moment is such a like nice moment. And I like when Margot gives Quentin his crown, when she's like, she says something about like, you are always like true to yourself. And that's really inspiring. And she like starts it with, I could say something devastating and mean, but I'm not going to. And you know, that's kind of the first time we see Margot be like sweet with these with like someone other than Elliot.
Mhm.
And I do really like that. So we get Alice becomes a Niffin. Quentin wishes himself back to a magical life. My first big episode that I love is the heist episode because they hadn't all been together for a minute, and we get like them going through this heist. What do you think about season 2, Neil?
Season 2, I like what you said where it's kind of season 1.5, or you need these first 2 seasons to get really into the magic of the show and Fillory and all that. To me, it was actually one of my least favorite seasons overall, just because it felt like we spent so much time dealing with the aftermath of season 1 and then kind of like slowly getting into a new plot. And then all of a sudden we were at the end of the season again. And it's like, we didn't really get that really big, this is what season 2 is. It was just kind of, it always just felt like an afterthought of season 1.
Yeah.
I wonder if I got lucky that I think seasons like 1 and 2, if not 1, 2, and 3 were like already out on Netflix maybe when I watched it.
I think so, yeah.
I don't think they dropped just the first season. I think they dropped at least 1 and 2.
That may have been true. Yeah.
I think you might be right.
Yeah.
Well, so, I mean, I think this show definitely can, like, what's the word I'm looking for? It benefits from a binge. But even with a binge, I will say it's still very easy to lose track of the plots.
I will say I just looked it up. So I watched season 1 January 2017, and then season 2 aired April 2017. And I think me going from having binged season 1 in literally a day to then having to watch season 2 week to week, I think that kind of broke my brain, and it's probably why I don't like it as much.
Yeah. Because I binged season 1 as well, and season 1, like once it gets going, like there is so much plot and momentum that keeps you gripped. And then you're absolutely right. Like early in season 2, like once the beast has been dealt with, it hits a real slump. Like the Fillory stuff becomes a massive fucking drag.
Well, because Elliot's like pissed off he's got to stay there too. Like they're not having fun either.
Yeah.
I think that's it. It's like you're not having fun. The characters aren't having fun. Quentin isn't having fun because he's like grieving Alice and having really depressing sex with his coworker.
Right.
We're doing Buffy season 6, but it's only season 2.
And not to mention all the Julia stuff, which like she's not Gladys yet, right? Like it's like all that trauma. And yeah, they didn't drop together. They dropped a year later, but I wonder if I didn't watch them until the second season was already available.
I think you didn't watch till they were, I think all 3 seasons were up when you watched it, Kim.
At least 1 and 2.
But so, remind me, how does season 2 end? Because I don't fucking remember.
They meet Ember and Umber.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Both of them. They'd already met Ember, I believe.
Yes, because Ember had been like kind of a like reoccurring character. And then Quentin kills him, right?
Yeah. Ember kills Umber because Umber's like it's like Bert and Ernie, right? Like
Right.
Ember's like Ernie and Umber's like Bert. They're just very different. One's like chaos and the other one's like very neat, small, tiny worlds. Yeah, so Ember kills Umber and then Quentin kills Ember.
But then that's bad, right? Isn't it bad for a reason? I forget. It's like gods have parents or something.
That's what leads to magic being eradicated.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because then the season kind of ends. We get that scene, right, where the guy walks into that one classroom that we always go back to and turns off the like
the only Break Bill's classroom.
Yeah, the only one. So season 3 is, I think, the best season. This is where I think Margot and Elliot like become 100% main characters. Mm-hmm. Maybe not like Quentin is still the main character, but I would say together the two of them are the other main character. They start off, I remember watching this, and this was when I was like, wait, someone has to be a big Buffy fan here. Because when Elliot leaves on Muntjac, the boat that we had met, they're talking about they have met Fen and Elliot's child who we learn is not actually their child. But the fairy queen kind of says like, oh, time happens different in the fairy realm. That's why she's older. Margot and Elliot are talking about how cliche it is, the like time travel, a child who ages up.
Yeah.
And they're like, Angel, Twilight, Buffy. And Margot corrects him and goes, actually, Buffy's sister was never a child. She just appeared.
Yeah.
And that's what I remember being like, ooh, these people have to, someone is a big Buffy fan on this show.
Oh, yeah.
And then ended up being a lot of people.
Was that the same? No, I think it must have been a different conversation where they have an extended reference to and it's just the best. Like, if you haven't watched Buffy, that scene makes no fucking sense.
It's very best episode of Buffy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just so great. Like, people might be listening in on us, so we have to talk in code.
Yeah, I think that's the first episode of season 3 because I think I remember being like, I know you stopped watching this show, Ian, but you have to watch this like season. So when I rewatched it, I was like, I had to have texted Ian and told him he needs to keep watching.
You know what? You're right, because it's season 2 that the fairies are introduced, because the dude that's like in love with the sloth, whose name I can never remember, he is the one that he kind of tells them about the fairies, and Margot's like, excuse me, they can turn magic back on? Why didn't you tell me this? And he's like, well, the fairies, and they take her eye.
And that's the big Les Mis up when we find out about the fairies, because she does the deal with them to save Quentin, or Elliot, who then doesn't need saving.
Which another good line is when Margot's watching it in that whatever little like water bowl where she can see what's going on, and she turns and goes, I'd give you an update, but I hate to see grown men cry. And I'm like, love you. But so yeah, she loses her eye, the fairies take her eye, and we get the pop culture speech. I forgot, you're right, that's the first episode, is that pop culture speech.
Yeah.
And I remember someone tweeting that and me being like, okay, wait, maybe I do want to get back into this, and you being like, you have to get back into this.
Yes.
Because that is one of like the best scenes of the show.
Yes.
Right?
It was brilliant. It was so perfect. And I understood all of them except maybe one Doctor Who reference.
The only reference I didn't get is the Battlestar Galactica one, but like, okay, sure, fine. And I love Margot's line is, I love when they do a terrorism allegory with mostly white people. Which is like such a good line.
So season 3 is so good too, because we've got the keys to sort of ground it.
Yes.
The other seasons are all over the place in certain ways that it's just harder to ground. But we know everyone at this point, and we get to know Josh and halfway through. But like everyone's kind of working on the same thing, even though they're doing it in all of the ways that this show, gives us all of these different worlds and different characters doing all these different things all at once.
Yes, because they actually all aren't together. They like make a reference about it in the musical episode. How like, that's almost at the end of the season, and they haven't all been together in a very long time. So like them singing together is like kind of the first time they all have been together in a while, which adds to like the emotionalness of that. But I think a lot about, we have to keep it very best episode of Buffy, and her going, musical, and him just saying the other one, and the captions just saying hush. Like, that is so good. And like, I love that they made the joke of like, those are the 2 best episodes of Buffy, because they are, right?
Oh, fact, yeah.
Yeah, and like also that this is very me and Kim of like when he makes a Game of Thrones reference and she's like, glad I made you read those books, and he's like, well, I read the wiki, those books like 1,000 pages long. And like this season gives us, I think Fen becomes way more of a character this season.
Yeah.
We did forget to talk about her, but I think she becomes, and Marina, we did forget to talk about Marina. So the fairies, Candace Cain is also really good as the fairy queen, because she is terrifying.
God, yeah.
I'm so glad you brought her up, because I hadn't realized, obviously under all that Tilda Swinton makeup, I hadn't realized that's who it was until I recently watched the documentary Disclosure on Netflix. And yeah, so it made me appreciate that performance even more, that she is sort of so otherworldly and sinister, but that there is like a real sort of, you can still connect with her and like what's motivating her, she being the ruler who's just trying to do the right thing for her people, and her and Margot having that like grudging respect. It's just like, oh yeah, it's good shit. And I didn't like the fairies at first, but it kind of, I liked what it ended up at.
Yeah, I didn't like them at first. She was terrifying, and I love that you know, towards the end, she does respect Margot, right? Like, she even says that in the, like, when she has to sacrifice herself, she says she always saw something in Margot. And while she was awful to Margot at first, I believe that she did, you know?
Yep.
Mhm.
So we learn that child is not their child. Penny dies?
Mm-hmm.
Kim, remind me how Penny dies.
I don't remember. He's got poison cancer, magic cancer.
Yep.
Mhm.
Oh, right.
And he's like kept alive. They kind of string him along for a while, and then it's like, no, yeah, you're dead. He's like
Right.
astral projecting for a while, even though he's dead. And then it's like, yeah, no, you live in the underworld and work for the library, and you're actually weirdly content with this other new dead life that you have.
And then we lose Josh for a few episodes. The way he comes back is a musical episode. I think my two favorite episodes are this and the Margot desert episode in season 4. That's also a musical.
The Under Pressure episode, you mean, as the first favorite? The Josh episode?
Like
yeah.
This Josh episode and then the Margot desert sing-along, I think, are my two favorite episodes. I tried to look this up. I couldn't find it. They probably also had to pay a lot of money for a David Bowie song too, right?
Yes.
There's like 100%. No way that came cheap.
Definitely not. And I actually remember, so when they announced that they were doing the musical episode of The Magicians was, I think, like maybe a week after we announced we were doing our first musical episode of Riverdale.
Okay.
And it was like a big, like, ooh, like they're our competition when like really nobody's our competition. We're a CW show, they're sci-fi.
Right.
But it was so fascinating because like seeing how those musical episodes play out in real time, behind the scenes, is so expensive. It's a completely different like way to produce an episode of television. And it's just like, it's so cool to watch Josh in this instance kind of take center stage and kind of narrate this episode. Whereas like typically in a TV show, when you have a musical episode, you do have your main characters as like your leads. And maybe like they're like in Buffy, there's Sweet, who's kind of guiding the musical episode, but not really doing as much. Whereas like Josh is like literally like the main character of this episode.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
I always want to ask, like if I had ever gotten the chance to ask the writers or the actors of the show, I'd like be like when do they come up to you and they're like, so who can sing? You know, like when do they decide like, okay, we want to do this? Like, can they all sing? Like, did they all do like musical theater, or do they know that coming into it? You know, like Katie can really sing.
Yeah.
My guess would be it was on their resume.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They probably had a conversation when they did the Les Mis number in season 2 of like, okay, who would want to be a part of this? Who can be a part of this? And then like some people are like, well, I'm not even like in the Fillory story, but like, just so you know, I can sing like Katie.
Yeah.
True. Yeah, because she's not even in that first musical, but she like clearly can sing.
Really, really
Yeah.
well.
Oh, even to the point that, like, yeah, in Margot's musical, she's like, "What the hell are you doing here?" And she's like, "I can sing better than you." Like, that's why.
Yeah. And I feel like that was literally just how they write. They were like, "Oh yeah, we need to have Kate because she's the best singer."
I can't believe we haven't said this yet, but I think it's maybe because season 3 is when it happens. But like this show tackles such heavy, emotional, like raw things that we as real humans can relate to. But like, Ian, I feel like you've used this phrase a lot, but like doesn't take itself too seriously. Like we get all of these hilarious moments, and there's a lot of like breaking the fourth wall kind of things that are like subtle. It's not like they're turning to the audience like in a Shakespeare play, but y'all know what I mean. Like, yeah. And it's so well put together in that it's like both funny and like dramatic and like everything that you want. I can't believe it wasn't more popular. Oh,
I know.
How did the show get canceled?
It's devastating. And I don't know where she comes in because I didn't Google it like I probably should have, but I was absolutely just like, it made my heart so warm that Marlee Matlin was the daughter of the librarian and that she was in this show because I just love her. Like, I love her.
She is really good in this show, too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's season 3 where we get her really good episode where they're in that, like, they use the mirrors to cross over into the library.
I believe so.
I think it might be.
Because they're after a key or, like, a book to get to a key or something.
It's towards the end of season 3, I think.
Because I want to say it's either right before or right after the, like, the musical episode. Because I remember it being like, a like 1-2 punch of like two really phenomenal episodes of the show like in a row.
Yeah.
Because that episode, like, it's intense. Like, you want them to get out, and then the fucking mirror explodes and they don't, and it's shot so beautifully with like completely black, but like their little platform and the mirrors.
Mm-hmm.
But so I will say another thing that I love about this first big musical episode is so they all sing David Bowie together, which is already like hitting all of my buttons. And I love that at the start of it, Margot's like, well, enjoy our death screams, I guess, because like they're about to be like executed on Muntjac. And then the boat saves them. And like, this makes me cry every time. And it's because we get these like subtle moments of showing how progressive and actually like what a heart Margot has from earlier when she won't let the boat be raped, right? Which is a ridiculous sentence to say, but in the context of the show makes sense. Because it's like she finds out the boat is sentient and like is alive. So she's like, no, we can't just force it to have sex. And she's the only one that really cares because everyone else kind of is like, well, it's a fucking boat. Who cares? And she's like, no, it's a sentient boat. I don't want that to happen.
Right.
And so the boat saves them. And for me, that was like such a nice moment when she's like, Margot turns to the boat and she's like, are you a Bowie fan? And Elliot's like, Margot fan. And I'm like, same, me too. So how does season 3 end? Neil?
Alice betrays them, right? And then the keys get destroyed, and then that's when Julia uses her powers to reconstruct the keys.
Right.
And then a monster gets out, and they all end up with like the new identities and new memories, which I hate as a trope. It's like, no, don't break my gang up.
Yes.
Yeah, and did they do that at the end of season 3? I think they did. So you can see they're all like that. Like Elliot's the monster, and they're all kind of back in these normal lives. I remember being furious.
Yes.
Oh, I was so worried for Elliot. I thought they were going to kill him next.
Yeah.
Me too. Yes, I did too.
And especially because Margot and Elliot had become like this like power couple, basically, that we loved by you know, who knows when in that season. And then they like broke them up. Ugh.
Yes. I remember being very worried because I agree with you, Philip. I also hate that as a trope. But I gotta say, season 4 opens, and I kind of enjoyed the way they did it.
Agree.
I like that they didn't keep it going on for too long. It like they did it for like one episode, and then almost immediately, like even under the spell of these new lives, like Margot knows something's up.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can't change these people; they're gonna figure it out. And also the fake out of like the season ends with you thinking that Katie is like being arrested as an addict, and it's like, oh my god, like they're putting the working class character through it again, and then it turns out that she was actually an undercover cop, and it's like, you know, defund the police and all that, but also I was just glad that it was a little subversion of the expectations of that character.
But like, oh my god, I can't believe they made Katie a cop.
Yes.
Guys.
It's like, she's a ballsy detective, yo.
No, but I agree. I was super worried going into like at that point I had to wait a year for the next show, right? The next piece, because I watched them all, I don't know if cable or anyway so finally when I got to see it, I was like, oh, thank God they're not like stuck in these other personalities for too long. And then pretty early on we get maybe episode 5 is when we get to be in Elliot's head and we see that he's still there. So
yeah. I will say, even with that, I did think they were gonna, I thought, because, you know, this show loved traumatizing all these characters. Because we got that Elliot was still there, I was like, wait, is this a trick? So we're gonna get our hopes up and then he will die and it'll be even sadder because we know he's actually still in there. Like, that's kind of, because we get that episode, I want to say at like the halfway mark where they like figure out a plan and like Julia has that new follower who just gets murdered really quickly.
Oh,
and like,
Anna.
Yeah. And they're like in the park. I forget what happens that like, does Julia come in and mess it up or Alice come in and mess it up? Someone comes in and messes it up. I thought that was where they were going to kill Elliot and it be like a sad thing. We also find out Santa Claus is real in this season, which is something they referenced early on in the show.
Oh yeah.
I loved the slow reveal of it though, that you thought he's just this magician who like, and people thought he was like a nonce, and then it's like, oh no, he's Father Christmas.
He like literally is Santa Claus.
And then it was Alice that is the one to kind of, you know, to meet him. It just that whole bit was perfect.
Yeah, I love that shit. So we kind of, this season, I will say, it gives me one of my favorite episodes, but I don't love it as much just because I don't love Elliot being possessed the whole season.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I almost wish we could have gotten like, okay, he's possessed for a little bit, but then like it invades, it like takes over the body of some random person that we don't care about. But yeah, that would be my biggest qualm, is that Elliot is not Elliot, and Elliot is an enjoyable character to watch. But it does give us the Margot musical episode, which is one of my fucking favorite. It's like the episode I go back to the most when I do like a rewatch. Angela, do you like that episode?
I do. I also think that I agree with you. I wish that Elliot having that whatever the darkness inside him was shorter, but it also like I was just like, damn, this guy's a good actor. Like it really showcased. I mean, being that in such a dark place of like just murderous toy people, like he nailed it. He made it believable, and to see who he was earlier on, I'm like, man, this guy's a good actor. I hope he gets a lot of opportunities because he really, it's just great acting in this show. Like, really, really good acting.
I was trying to rack my brain to remember what other show did that, where there was like a character that we loved, like a beloved character that for a season was a totally different character and we wanted them to be back to normal sooner. And it was Twin Peaks, The Return.
Oh my god, you're right. Yeah, I was going to say, like, they did that with Fred in the last season of Angel. Like, for maybe.
Oh god,
yeah. Right.
This is where we get the Josh Margot romance really amping up, and they really do sell me on it. She also makes Fen, what is it? She makes her exile her from Fillory. And we get that really badass moment where she's like crying and being like, you have to do this because we have to save Elliot. And I almost hate that like what she does kind of doesn't do much, right? Or does it?
I don't even remember. I think, you know what, it's maybe it doesn't do much on a plot level, but it's important character storytelling.
Yeah.
All right, fair. And I love the episode before that. We get the moment of Josh giving her the headphones. And I kind of like, she walks out, she does a slow walk out to Pat Benatar, and it's like pretty badass.
Yes. Yeah.
And then we get, then Quentin dies.
Right. I was gonna say, let's speed to Quentin. Quentin dies. I can't hear Take On Me now. Like I hear it at work and I'm like, oh, this song's emotional now. The way it's shot is really well done, of like the like whatever the shards like ripping him to pieces and Alice like screaming and being pulled out. And then like cutting to the funeral, but also getting Quentin to watch it. Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, and him seeing Elliot walk up and knowing that his sacrifice was worth it.
Yes.
And like, you see his face like crumple because his friend is back and he saved him.
And they do such a good job with like, waiting for that moment.
I love that he did it with minor mending, which at the point when he found out that was his specialized skill seemed like the lamest thing in the entire world. And that was actually what he used to be able to even have that sacrifice. That was his skill. That was what it was all for. So that
I wanted to add, I'm glad you brought that up. One of the things I really liked about the way the show developed is that they went away from this like, which house are you? Are you a Ravenclaw kind of thing?
Yeah,
like that other YA does. It's like, okay, like yeah, there's like the physical kids and the naturalists and whatever Alice does with light or whatever. But then it's not really gone into very much outside of that first season, like briefly. But then when it does matter and is important, like they remind us in a way that doesn't feel overly like, we forgot to develop this,
Right.
Yeah. Also, if you ask me what each one of their things were, I could not tell you.
Yeah, I don't think they really say what Margot and Elliot.
Well, they're the physical kids because they live in the physical kids' cottage.
Yeah.
We also, before we leave season 4, we get Marina's apartment, which is just an important space because we no longer live in Breakbills anymore. So I forgot by the time season 5 came out, like how they'd acquired Marina's apartment, but I did remember it was her apartment and that they were all living in it somehow.
Because like it's safe, right? It has like the like whatever magical things that make it a safe apartment for them to live in.
Yeah,
it's like the nicest Airbnb I've ever seen.
Oh yeah,
true that.
So season 5, Margot and Elliot clearly become the main characters. We get that very good Elliot and Alice episode where it's kind of like they're working through their trauma and kind of, I really liked the idea of, again, the show plays with tropes in a different way than most shows do, because the trope of like, okay, this character died and like, oh, Alice doesn't know that Elliot also was in love with him and maybe they had something, but then we find out Alice did know and she was cool with it. And that's some shit I love.
Like, Alice is the most intelligent character on this show. How was she not gonna, with enormous glasses, how was she not gonna see that? Like,
Enormous glasses?
it's a beautiful conversation that they have where it's like, and again, I think it's an important humanizing moment for Alice, and for Elliot, because, sort of, these are characters who have never really spent a great deal of time together, and now that Quentin was maybe the only link that connected them and he's gone, so to have them sort of be brave enough to tell each other the truth. And I was just so glad that after we had that episode, Escape from the Happy Place, where we realized that Elliot did reciprocate those feelings for Quentin, that they weren't going to just let that go now that Quentin's dead, that that's still a really important part of Elliot's story. And the other characters know that, and that's just part of the texture of the show now.
Yeah, and that, you're right. It's the fact that the other characters know, and no one's like, ooh, like it's just like, it is what it is, right? Like everyone.
And it's not like, oh, the queer character is like pining for the guy who has a girlfriend. It's like, no, there was an alternate reality where they raised a child together.
Yeah. We also get, God, this season gets a little like, I don't remember the main plot. I wanted to know what you all felt about. So we're just gonna blow to the finale. We're gonna blow past it to the finale. Neil, as someone who's written for TV, we can say this, Kim, because Summer talked about it on the podcast. She did say she wasn't sure if it was going to be canceled, and then it was. But then the showrunner said they did write it to be a finale. Do you think it was written to be the series finale?
I struggle with series finales a lot because half the time you kind of go into a series finale thinking, well, there's the chance this might be the series finale, so let's write it so that everyone gets a happy enough ending. But then there's like the way that you would end the show if you truly knew this is the very last episode. And that's when you really want to pull out all the stops. You want to be able to honor all your characters, and you want to be able to build to that too over the course of an entire season almost. So with this finale, it does feel like they kind of got, they sense the blood in the water, maybe around like 5 or 6 episodes left of the season. They're like, hey, we might not be coming back. So they kind of had to write it in a way that's like, okay, if this is the series finale, great. If not, we can tell more stories and be able to build upon this world more, and then eventually be able to wrap up all these stories how we truly want them to wrap up. So it does kind of feel as if they had wrote this with the hope that they'd be coming back. But they were like, but let's just close out the stories well enough that if this is the ending, people will be like, well, that wasn't the worst ending in the world.
Right. That's fair. Kim.
It just made me want more. I understand that it can function in a way for sure. Like, it's, if they were to go on, they're rebuilding Fillory. That's a huge undertaking that would almost be a new show in a way, I guess, because we know a lot of the places there and the characters, and we've really moved away from the Chatwins, for example. But at the same time, like, I'd watch that show, and the way that they do such good work with the pacing, where so much can happen over either a short or long period of time, depending on what's happening in the show. I felt like they could have done another season, despite the fact that we have this whole new world. And like, can they just have magic back for a little while and like get to play with magic and have some fun? Like, no, unfortunately, no. Always has to be a plot point that magic is missing or browning out, or it's threatened, or in one place and not in the other, etc.
Angela?
I loved when they were sitting there at the end, and I felt like, to the best of their ability, they rounded it out, and they gave us a place to take it with our imaginations. Don't they bring things back like a couple years later? Can't they just bring it back?
Right. Philip, what do you think of the finale?
I obviously agree that once they sort of proved with the 5th season that this cast is strong enough to survive without Quentin, I would have loved, sort of several more seasons, just because I love these characters. I love this world. But my favorite kind of finale is the one where you feel like there are more adventures and stories happening, like once the screen cuts to black, that it's not the end for these characters. You sort of, you know what trajectory they're off to, or you see possibilities, and you're happy to like let them go on that journey without you. And so I think when I was watching it, I think I was under the impression that it had been written as a series finale, just because they were kind of burning through so much plot. They were like, we are literally going to blow Fillory up. We're going to kill off Zelda, sweet Zelda.
Yeah.
And then to have it, to have it end on such a full circle moment of Margot the Destroyer becoming Margot the Creator, it felt very intentional. I think the one bit that did feel a bit weak for me is like, what the fuck is Elliot going to do being a teacher? That felt a bit like, like in those later seasons of Glee, where like these people who've graduated just keep hanging around their high school like fucking losers.
I wonder, I think I agree with you though, that like I do like a finale where there's some question marks that we can fill in with our own imaginations, and like, they leave us with something like that. But I wonder how much of my frustration with it would be different if Margot and Elliot would have just wound up together, because I feel like it's like a big problem for me.
Yeah.
I thought it was you, Philip, but someone said to me that they felt like that made sense because they needed to be able to function separately, which I do understand, but I still would have liked it. I don't like the idea of it ending with them separately, because they ruled Fillory together, and they they fucked up a lot, but they had their heart into it. And if any two characters I had to pick to create a new world, it would be Margot and Elliot. And not just because I love them, but because we saw them as rulers together, and they did Margot mostly was the one that got her shit together, and she was a good king. And yeah, I don't know. I think that was my main issue with the finale. The plots up to it felt a little rushed. Like I was like, wait, we're just blowing through plots left and right here. For me, it felt the way Angel felt, where it was like, it didn't feel like they knew there was going to be the finale, but then with 4 episodes left, they were like, shit, let's make this a series finale in case. That's kind of what it felt to me, where then we have these sweeping, that rapture starts happening very suddenly, and we don't check in with characters that had been reoccurring side characters up until that finale. We don't check in with Tick or any of those side Fillory characters. And that felt weird to me. Or we don't see Todd. But I will say the moment of Margot eating that fucking sandwich, just resigned to well, I'm going to die here. All right. I'm going to eat the sandwich.
Oh my God. Sitting on that counter with her ham sandwich, just and I think, that just showing the growth that she's been through, where she is content to sacrifice herself. Because she's seen her to do it, and she knows that the sacrifice can be worth it. This fucking show.
So good.
That was a perfect moment, because I was so worried. I was like, she's gonna get down there, and she's gonna die. I totally thought she's gonna get the hero death that we got from Quentin, and I would have understood that as an ending, but I'm glad that Penny popped in to save her at the very last moment before. I'm glad she didn't die, because it would have been a little too sad of a end for the show, which is always my argument in Buffy when people are like, some of the main characters I'm like, Anya and Spike were the only ones that could have died, because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to get Buffy smiling at the end. If anyone else died, she wouldn't have been able to smile. But so yeah, that moment for me was that's my favorite moment from the finale. Yeah, Angela, what's your favorite moment from the finale?
Literally, I think that my favorite moment was really that end scene where they're all sitting there, and they've created a whole new world, and it's that whole idea fascinates me. I just I loved that there were talking animals. I bet there's talking animals in their new world. I think there should be talking animals here. I feel that you just imagine creating your own world. Mine would be absurd, and I would love it. I think just the hope of they're I don't know. I really think there could have been a spinoff, or should be. I don't know who I have to blow in Hollywood to make this happen, but
there are 2 horses.
Right.
I think they're continuing it in graphic novel form, I'm pretty sure. I have no idea if they're any good or not, but I know that they have done.
There are comics that have been coming out. There was a 6-episode limited series called The Magicians, but it wasn't about our characters at all. It was about a completely different story in the world of Break Bills, and I was really pissed off when I picked it up and was like, oh, this is actually not what I thought it was.
Oh,
I would settle for like a next gen, like the new class, like if you've got a magic school.
It wasn't even like next gen new class. It was just like, here's a completely original story that takes place in a world like the Magicians at Breakbills, and some characters have the same names, but most don't.
Okay, maybe not.
Yeah. That's funny because I actually meant to pick that up at work this week and read it before our episode, and now I'm glad I was like, shit, I didn't do that, but now I'm like, I don't need to do that.
Nope, here to tell you, it's just okay.
Oh.
All right, before we wrap up, Angela, what would you say is your favorite episode of the show?
Oh my gosh.
You could pick like 2 or 3.
Oh gosh, I liked anything with Bacchus, because I like him in life in general. I really enjoyed. I just enjoyed the whole show. I can't pick one. I liked the rabbits; they were funny, but I just thought it was hilarious. It's just so absurd, and I love that irreverent humor where there's like a talking rabbit that's a messenger.
That's like saying fuck.
Yeah, I just can't even pinpoint one episode because they're all just so special.
Neil, do you have a favorite or a few favorites?
Well, I think my favorite episode would have to be the Quentin and Elliot Cabin in the Woods episode in season 3.
That was good.
Where they live out their whole lives together. But I think my favorite moment was the Les Mis moment, because it took me completely off guard. I was not expecting it. I was so tickled when it happened. And then they do musical Mondays here in LA, or at least they used to in the before times. And they would show clips from like Tony Awards performances, or like different bootlegs, or different like Glee episodes. And one of the clips they played was that Les Mis episode, or that Les Mis clip, like the week after the episode aired. And I was just like, someone else here is my people? I'm like freaking out.
Philip, what would you say is some of your favorites?
So yeah, I agree. The Life in a Day episode where Elliot and Quentin have their life together, and then there's that episode has like its sort of sequel in Escape from the Happy Place, which is the one where it's all in Elliot's mind, and we have his memories of that, and that has like the immortal line, "Buckle up, it's all daddy issues and dicks from here on in," when he's going deep into his psyche. And then there's I think it's called The Sidekicks. It's one of the episodes that's narrated by Penny, where it's just all about like who gets to tell their own story and who gets to be the hero of a story. And I think it's just like it captures one of the themes of the Magicians, that like anybody can be important and anybody can do great things. And it's one of the more like earnest moments of the show, because most of the time it's got its tongue firmly in its cheek. But I really, really loved that. Nobody gets overlooked and nobody gets counted out.
Oh. Kim?
Yeah, I mean, Life in the Day is just so good. And it's good because, I mean, it's a trope, but it's the best done ever version I've seen of it. And I've watched all of Star Trek The Next Generation, where it's also very well done. So in the way that it comes back, so that's got to be my top favorite. But then I really like the season 3 premiere because of the way that whole season is just great. And I think it sets it up really well. And then obviously your favorite episode, Ian, is one of my favorite episodes too.
Yeah, I like my favorite moment is them all singing David Bowie Under Pressure together, but my favorite episode is the Margot in the Desert episode, because Summer Bishil, she fucking commits, and I mean, I said this before, but like the fact that they always are quietly showing you how progressive and forward thinking Margot is. Like, yeah, she could be severe and tell you to fuck off, but like she doesn't want these women living under this sexist fucking regime where like they're pretending the spirits of the desert are evil, but actually they're there to help women. And then she fucking defeats the town and like liberates the village, and like that's shit I love. And I mean, we mentioned it before, but even the silliness of Katie being there and her being like, "What are you doing here?" And she's like, "I can sing." Like, thank you all for joining me to talk about one of my other favorite shows that I don't get to talk about as often. I was so excited to ask the 4 of you because I knew you all love it the way I do.
Yes.
If you like our podcast, you can find Slayerfest 98 on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and other corners of the internet where you find your podcasts. You can subscribe to us on Patreon, which really helps keep the podcast going, gives you access to a ton of bonus episodes, My Nudie Judy episode, which is all about sex, and access to our private Facebook group and monthly Zooms. If you want to follow us on social, we are at SlayerFestX98. I am at ENX Carlos on social media. Kim, where can everyone find you?
At Kim Ann Joe South on Twitter.
And Angela, where can everyone find you?
I got a bunch of different names. So I'm Angela MFN Rockstar on the Instagram and Mrs._A Rockstar on the Twitter. And then I'm at Angela Rockstar on the TikTok. And then I don't know, the YouTube is like something, but just type in Angela Rockstar.
Philip, where can everyone find you?
I'm on Twitter at Philip_Ellis. That's Philip with 1 L, Ellis with 2. I am on TikTok, but I'm only there to watch. I don't create.
Neil, where can everyone find you?
Everyone can find me at Neil_McNeil on Twitter. Yes, that's my name. It's Neil McNeil. And you can also find me on Instagram, just Neil McNeil, no underscore.
Yeah, and also you can find Slayerfest98 on TikTok as well. I'm like joining the youths. Thank you all for doing this, and thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time. Bye.
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 Bye.